Today, I will be ranking the top 5 most absurd book banning stories I have heard over the last year. Most of these involve the library being in danger of closing over a handful of books in the library's collection, and sometimes books that aren't even in the library's collection. This is in no way a conclusive list. There are so many more stories that I am not talking about today. I worked at a public library, so I'm familiar with how public libraries operate. That is why whenever I'm talking about book bans and challenges, I am talking about the public library side of things. I have never worked in a school library. I'm not as familiar with how they operate, so I am not going to focus on school libraries. Libraries are a vital part of communities. Libraries offer so much more than just books. Whenever I worked at the library, I saw people coming in every day who did not have access to internet at home and did not have smartphones, and the library provided that service to them. Closing libraries closes opportunities. I will have an upcoming video talking about services provided at libraries that are not books, but today, the stories I'm talking about, the fights, are all about the books. So let's get into it. Coming in at number 5 is Hamilton County, Indiana. I have an entire video talking about the outlandishly strict policies the board members are imposing on the library. I will have that video linked in the description as well as in the cards. Also, just everything I'm talking about today, I will have stories linked in the description. In this case, basically any book that mentions sex-specific profanities or any act that is illegal in Indiana had to be moved from the children's section and the young adult section and placed in the adult section. This means 2 things. Firstly, the library employees are having to read every single book in the library's collection in order to make sure it is placed in the proper area. This is a huge ask for the employees. I don't know how many books are in this particular county, but I know that most of the time libraries hold thousands of books, and these library employees are having to skim them in a very short amount of time just to make sure the books are placed in the proper collection. Also, any children's mystery book, any book talking about the Civil War, whether fiction or nonfiction, or any other such book that mentions things that are illegal in the state of Indiana today, have to be moved to the adult section. This means if a child is looking for the book Nancy Drew, the child has to go to the adult section, which also might have 50 Shades of Grey. It kind of seems like this policy isn't actually doing what they want the policy to do. This story is low on the list because the books are not actually being removed from the library, and they are not specifically targeting LGBTQ books. That is not the case for the rest of these. Number 4, the entire state of Missouri. In August of 2022, the state of Missouri passed a law that any books with sexual content had to be removed from school libraries, or the school librarians could face jail time. The American Civil Liberties Union, also known as the ACLU, is suing the state of Missouri for infringing on students' rights and for the vague language in the law. In April of this year, when the Missouri state was looking at the state budget, the Missouri House passed a proposal that totally eliminated funding for all libraries in the state of Missouri, both school libraries and public libraries. One of the representatives said that he did not want any state money going towards a lawsuit against the state, but the ACLU has made clear that no state money was used in the lawsuit. Of course, removing funding from libraries threatens the library's ability to stay open. According to PBS.org, 20% of the residents of Missouri do not have high-speed internet. As I said previously, closing libraries closes opportunities. The budget for libraries was reinstated, but there is a new law in Missouri that affects public libraries and could potentially affect their funding. Basically, if a library employee gives material to a minor that the parent did not first approve, then the library could lose their state funding. I will read the direct wording from the law here. The library has or will adopt a written, publicly accessible policy allowing any minor's parent or guardian to determine what materials and access will be available to that minor. And no person employed by or acting on behalf of the library shall knowingly grant access to any minor, any material in any form not approved by the minor's parent or guardian. So what does that mean practically? Honestly, I could see a lot of Missouri libraries totally eliminating library cards for anyone under 18. This is the best way to mitigate liability for the library. I know my state was considering a very similar law, and my library was definitely considering not allowing teenagers into the library or anyone under 18 into the library without a parent or guardian with them. And the parent or guardian would have to sign a form in order to bring a minor into the library and would have to remain with the minor in the library at all times. A lot of that is because of the word access in the law. If the library does not have a completely closed off adult section of the library, then a teenager walking into the library has access to the adult section of the library, and therefore the library is allowing access to minors for adult content or content that the parent might not be okay with the minor reading, and the library could lose funding over it. I honestly don't understand how this law is doing anything that parents can't already do. Parents can already monitor what their children are reading, and parents can already prohibit their children from reading certain materials. Library employees should not be responsible for parenting or monitoring other people's children. Yet with this, that's exactly what is happening, and we're putting library funding on the line. Moving on to number 3. Llano County, Texas. There's a lot to cover here, so buckle in. In 2021, county commissioners in Llano County, Texas decided to eliminate the ebook and e-audiobook lending system Overdrive. You may be more familiar with Overdrive through the app Libby. Libby is run by the company Overdrive. This access was eliminated because minors could access this system. One of the county judges said, I quote, "I think we owe it to all parents, regardless if it's a school library or a public library, to make sure that materials is not inappropriate for children." But obviously the Overdrive service was for all residents, not just for children. But because children could access it and could possibly stumble across materials on that system that is not for them, the entire system was eliminated for all Llano County residents. In 2022, the library was able to make the switch to Biblioteca Cloud Library. This is another ebook lending system, but it only works with select e-readers and does not work with as wide of e-readers as Overdrive or Libby did. This service would also only be available to patrons over 18. There was discussion of only making Libby or Overdrive available to patrons over 18, but that was eventually shot down and they had to go with Biblioteca Cloud Library. The county commissioners also closed the library for 3 days and had an advisory board go through the library and catalog all the books in the library to make sure that those books were placed in the proper age range. In 2022, 7 patrons of the Llano County library system sued the county for the removal of the access to Libby Overdrive and for books that they claimed were removed during the cataloging of the library. A federal judge dismissed the case against reinstating the Libby Overdrive system, but in March 2023, a federal judge decided that the books that were removed from the library during the cataloging had to be returned to the library. With the announcement that the Llano County libraries would have to return the books that were originally removed from the library, the county commissioners of Llano County decided to hold a special meeting to see if they should even have any of the libraries open in the county or if they should close them altogether rather than return these books. Many members of the public in Llano County came out to support the library, and due to public pressure, the county commissioners did vote to keep the library open, though they are repealing the decision to return these books. I will have a link to the full list of books linked in the description, but the fight for the Llano County library system is still ongoing. If you think that is bad, it gets worse. Coming in at number 2 is the library in Bonkers, Ferry, Idaho. The library in Bonkers Ferry, Idaho is fighting to stay open over a list of books that the library does not even have in its collection. I really can't make this one make sense. This particular library, again, provides internet services for the community. It also has 3D printers and laser engravers and tutoring sessions for computers and smartphones for anyone in the community who needs those services. And it does not have the books being protested. but it was still in danger of being shut down. In February 2022, a parent came into the library asking the library if they had the book titled Genderqueer. This is an adult graphic novel memoir that is often a target for book challenges. The library did not have the book, so everyone went about their day and moved on. We wish. No, that is not what happened. In fact, that parent and a group of other parents came to the library with a list of 400 books that they found from the website Growing Freedom in Idaho. This is a list of books that are supposedly inappropriate for children. I do want to note here that these parents are coming forward with a list of books that they found on a website that claim that these books are inappropriate for children, which means these are most likely books the parents have not read themselves. So they didn't do their own research. They are taking a list and saying, these are books we don't want in the library system. The library in Bonkers, Ferry, Idaho only had one book from that list in their library system. And that book is titled, Who Was Frederick Douglass? I honestly haven't read this book, but I am very curious what is in this book that is inappropriate for children to read. I have the full list of 400 books linked in the description. Since the library did not have a majority of these books, the residents went to the board meetings and started insisting that the library create a policy stating that they would never purchase any of the books on this list. They also wanted books specifically targeted for preemptive bans that had LGBTQ content or sexual content in them. There were threats of violence at these board meetings that led to the board meetings being held at the police station in Bonkers, Ferry. The insurance company for the library also informed the library that they would not renew the insurance policy with the library because the library was now too big of a liability. The insurance policy was initially extended for a few months until the library could sort things out and has now actually been renewed for a full year. The library is currently still open. It has a new director since the previous director left due to harassment she was receiving. And the board is currently considering what policies it wants in place for determining whether or not books are appropriate for the library. After all of those stories, are you ready for number one? Are you sure? Because it's a doozy. Number one, Jamestown Township, Michigan. To start with, 85% of the funding for the Jamestown Township Library comes from the millage tax. This is basically a real estate tax where people who own property in Jamestown Township will pay $15 a year in taxes, and that money is allocated to the library. This is a tax that the residents of Jamestown Township vote on every few years. The library had an adult graphic novel memoir that you might be familiar with from the previous story, Genderqueer. This book was in the adult section of the library, but this book was also challenged by a resident of Jamestown Township. The library, instead of removing the book, decided to put the book behind the counter. This means that any patron who wanted to read that book had to request it specifically, and no one would come across that book if they were just browsing the shelves. There were other books that were also challenged. Most of the books involving LGBTQ characters, even ones that don't have sexual content in them beyond kissing. None of these other books were removed from the library. In August of 2022, the Jamestown Township residents had the opportunity to vote on the millage tax to see if they will fund the library for the next 10 years. A group called the Jamestown Conservatives launched a campaign to defund the library because the library had LGBTQ books in them. This campaign was ultimately successful, and the town voted to defund the library. This was a close race with only 62% of voters voting to defund the library. This story is definitely different from the previous ones because in this story, the residents that benefit from the library are the ones voting in a democratic process whether or not to keep the library. Personally, I do find it sad that the residents think that this handful of books in the library outweighs all the other services and benefits the library provides to the community. Of course, I'm not the only one saddened by this. There was a resident in Jamestown Township that started a GoFundMe to raise funds to keep the library open. The best-selling author Nora Roberts herself donated $50,000 to this library to help keep it open. The library later said they have more Nora Roberts books in their collection than they have books with LGBTQ content in it. The library tried again on the November ballot to pass this millage tax, and it was again defeated. This time it was a little bit closer, with only 55% of voters voting to defund the library. The library is currently open because of donations, but without a steady source of funding for the library, it is currently slated to close down entirely in 2024. The board members are currently looking at ways to reach out to residents and see if there's any way to gain support for funding the library again. Currently, the future of the Jamestown Township Library in Michigan is uncertain. That's a bummer place to end this video, but that is also what the public libraries in the US are currently facing. I will be making videos about how you can support your public library, so if you want to see those, subscribe to catch more videos on this topic.